Hi, this is Dr. David Branham. Today, we're going to talk about the Texas justice system. This is a supplement for your chapter that you've been assigned from Texas politics to justice system. All the material is actually in the text reading, and a lot of this material will also be on your test. So hopefully this supplement will help you better understand the Texas justice system, and at the same time, give you a better chance to make a better grade on the test. So let's get started. First, the Texas judicial culture. As you can probably tell when you start looking at the Texas Constitution, Texas history, our top priority in this state has usually been to make getting criminals off the street the top priority. It's a get tough on crime type of mentality, and consequently, jails are traditionally the top priority in our criminal justice funding. And that funding doesn't necessarily mean that the jails will be nice. It just means we're going to spend a lot of money to make sure that we can put a lot of prisoners in jail. I mean, prison overcrowding is often an issue in states. A lot of times you'll have to actually release prisoners because of overcrowding. In Texas, the culture has always been, let's not release prisoners and if at all possible. So it's consequently been their top priority to make jails and the jail system their top priority when it comes to funding. Other things that aren't top priorities, procedures, making sure things are done by the book. If you look at a city like Tulia, Texas, and the history there, you see a prime example of someone who didn't go by the book, someone in law enforcement who ended up making a lot of injustice occur in the state by making a lot of arrests for drug charges that were just plain false, putting a lot of people in jail falsely, and a lot of it was racially motivated. So we do have a history of not making by-the-book procedures and policy a top priority. We also don't make it a top priority to pay our police officers. So that's also an issue that we have. Civil rights protections is also in that category. We don't have a lot of civil rights protections as a top priority in Texas. We have a lot of history of violations. Hopefully going forward, those will get better. And the other thing is, criminals have a constitutional right to have a counsel when they are charged with a crime. Now, it has to be a felony crime. So you don't get counsel if, for instance, you get a speeding ticket. You're not awarded counsel for that, or you don't have a constitutional right to counsel. But when you're charged with a felony, you do. It's a Sixth Amendment right. And so as that right is there, Texas has never made it a top priority to make sure that people that are charged get that right. So public defender system, it doesn't exist in Texas. A lot of states have public defender offices where they actually pay people to represent criminals to make sure that they get good representation. In Texas, we typically have judges assign cases to attorneys. Most attorneys don't want these cases because they don't pay very well. Those attorneys that do use these cases to make a living usually try to get as many of them as they can so they can make a lot of money. And consequently, the people they represent don't usually get good representation. So those are the priorities that Texas has traditionally put by the wayside. Traditionally, Texas is a get tough on crime state, and they haven't been a state overall who has a lot of empathy for prisoners or empathy for people who've been charged with crimes. There's two main areas of justice. One is civil law, and the other is criminal law. Now, civil law encompasses disputes between two or more private parties. So these are entities in society. This could be, individuals or corporations or government agencies. For instance, the state of Texas sues the federal government on a regular basis because the judicial system in the federal level often declares legislation in the state of Texas unconstitutional. So a lawsuit will occur. Or, for instance, Joe Biden not enforcing the laws at the border. Texas will have a lawsuit saying that he needs to do that, and so forth. So we have all of these types of civil cases where individuals or corporations or governments have a dispute, and those disputes are settled in court. Those are not criminal cases. People don't go to jail for those. And in most cases, what you get is compensation or an overturning of a ruling, for instance. That would be another ruling that you could have. Criminal law is different. It's generally defined as crimes against the state. Now, people don't quite understand that, because in a lot of cases, crimes against the state are occurring because a criminal committed a crime against an individual citizen. The citizens believe that crime was committed against them. Technically, in criminal law, the crime is committed against the state, not against the victim. So as crimes against the state are understood as violations of the penal code, for which the state can bring actions against alleged perpetrators, according to the rules defined by law of criminal procedure. So those cases are defendants versus the state. You'll hear that in the court, and it will be the state who puts up a case against the criminal and to say that they are guilty of the crime. In criminal cases, typically the standard for conviction is guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a pretty high standard. In civil cases, it's a preponderance of the evidence, meaning there's a better than chance than not that this occurred, and that's a different standard. So you don't have nearly as tough a standard in civil cases as you do in criminal cases. So we have two types of jurisdictions also. We have appellate jurisdiction and original jurisdiction. Now, appellate jurisdiction is the authority to hear cases that have already been tried in order to review the findings. And when they review these findings, they're basically reviewing the law, making sure that the law was abided by during the original case in the trial. So there are 14 intermediate appellate courts in Texas, and these courts have multiple judges, at least 3 judges. Overall, they have about 80, but they have at least 3 judges in every court, one of these 14 courts. And as I said before, no new facts are heard in these appellate cases. What they do is they focus on, did the original trial abide by the law? And what you find, if you remember in original trials, there'll be objections, and the judge will rule on those objections continuously, and they'll cite the reason for the objection, and so that goes into the record. And if the judge rules wrongly on an objection, that could be a case for an appeal to overturn the ruling of the courts. Now, that's a hard thing to do, especially in criminal cases. It's hard to do because you have to not only show that the judge made the wrong ruling, but you also have to show that the wrong ruling had an impact on the case that could have changed the outcome. And that's a pretty high standard. So in both civil and criminal cases, the first intermediate court of appeals is these Texas courts of appeals, these 14 cases courts. You go, and when you go, you basically say, this is what law was broken. The one exception to this rule, which we'll talk about in a minute, is the death penalty cases, which are bypassed right here by these appellate courts, and they're moved directly to the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest criminal court in the land in Texas. Now, original jurisdiction is the authority of a court to provide the very first hearing of a specific case. So that's where hearings start. And concurrent jurisdiction is when 2 different types of courts have original jurisdiction in the same type of case. Now, sometimes you have that overlap. So just understand those definitions. Concurrent jurisdiction deals with 2 courts having original jurisdiction in the same case. Original jurisdiction is a court's ability to hear a case from start to finish. Now, the Texas court system, if you look here, it starts with the bottom and goes up. The lowest level courts are the justice of peace courts and the municipal courts, and those are courts that are at the lowest level. County courts are kind of independent from all of it because they basically run the county. State district courts are the first level of district courts in the state. And then we just talked about the intermediate appellate court system. And then the top two courts in the state are the Texas Supreme Court and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. The Texas Supreme Court does not hear criminal cases. Texas Court of Criminal Appeals does not hear civil cases. So we have basically two Supreme Courts in Texas. Now, municipal courts and justice of the peace courts. These municipal courts are inside incorporated cities, like the city of Houston is an incorporated city. Now, there's a lot of areas in our state that are not incorporated in a city. I actually live in Atascocita, Texas, which is not actually in a city. So in those cases, counties have rule and there's no incorporated cities. So they don't have city ordinances in the city, and they don't have municipal courts in those cities. But cities like City of Houston do. They take care of cases where the fines are up to $2,000. We have justice of the peace courts in the county. Each county has 1 to 8 of these courts. So if you're in a county, this is the courts that you will go to. And these are local trial courts with very limited jurisdiction. They're basically restricted to only Class C misdemeanor criminal cases. Justice of the peace courts and municipal courts are unique in that appeals cases from these courts must be heard by trial de novo, where the trial must start from the beginning with new presentation of evidence. So just understand that for your test. These courts start from the beginning when they have these appeals to these courts. Texas district courts. Now, these are the lowest level of the state courts. They're trial courts of general jurisdiction in Texas. District courts have original jurisdiction in all of these types of cases. Felony criminal cases, original jurisdiction. Divorce cases, cases involving a title to land. Election contest cases. Civil cases in which the amount in controversy is $200 or more. Any matters in which the jurisdiction is not placed in another trial court. So anything that basically is not in municipal or justice peace courts goes directly to Texas district courts. As you can probably tell, these are busy courts. They're the lowest level of the state, and so these courts have a whole lot of cases go through them. And then you have the county courts, which we were talking about earlier. County courts are like are led by a county judge. In Harris County, Lena Hidalgo is the current county judge. And these are usually confined to probate cases. But in larger counties like Harris County, these courts are really more administrative. They're more like city councils, where the counties have, because these counties have very little lawmaking authority, and these courts become service oriented with elected officials and precinct commissioners focusing on service to their districts or the precincts. For instance, Harris County has 4 precincts. They're rather large precincts with over 1 million people in each of them, but they each have a commissioner. Like Rodney Ellis is a commissioner in one of them. Tom Ramsey is a commissioner up in Precinct 3. Their job basically is to service their precinct. And then you have Lena Hidalgo, who's the 5th person on this council, who's the county judge. She's not really so much a judge in her day-to-day duties. She's an administrator. She's like the mayor of the county. And so it's a lot of people get confused just because of the way these are labeled. The county judge is basically like a mayor in the large counties. So when you think of county government and the commissioner's court, is what they call it, that is basically the city council and the mayor of the county. And it's a good way to think of it, in dealing with the county government as you go. If you live in an unincorporated area, you'll need to know who your precinct commissioner is, because if you need something done in your street, you need some problem with the roads, you have some other problem with county facilities, parks, those are the people you're going to need to talk to. Judicial elections, district judges, that we've already talked about, Texas district courts, county level judges, justices of the peace, they are all elected judges. No one appoints them. They are elected. They run for office, and they are elected to 4-year terms. So these judges aren't appointed. These judges are elected. That is the tradition in Texas. That's the Texas Constitution. Texans like to elect who represents them. They don't really like any kind of appointment system, or a republic system is very minimized in Texas, where we elect a representative to do things for us. We like to we like to make our own appointments, so to speak, and we make those appointments at the ballot box. The Texas Court of Appeals, and I talked about this, the 14 intermediate courts of appellate jurisdiction. These courts hear both civil and criminal appeals, but they only hear appeals. They don't have any original jurisdiction. They focus on the law. So a civil case might get appealed to them, controversy between corporations, governments, individuals. If the law isn't abided, you will appeal the case to one of these courts, and they will hear your case. These courts have multiple judges. Remember, they have at least 3. There's about 80 overall, and they hear both civil and criminal appeals, but no original jurisdiction. The one place that they don't hear appeals is in death penalty cases. Those go directly to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest criminal court in the state of Texas. All these death penalty cases go there automatically. Now, if you go to the 14 courts of intermediate criminal appeals and you don't feel that you've gotten the right ruling there, you could actually appeal it as a criminal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. So if your first appeal doesn't go, it's not over for you. You can go to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. If it's a death penalty case, though, they just go ahead and bypass that intermediate appeal court and go directly to the highest court in the land. Now, the highest court in the land for civil cases is the Texas Supreme Court. It's a very important court, not only because it's the highest court for civil cases, it's also here's juvenile cases, which are all civil cases. So even juvenile criminal cases come to the Texas Supreme Court because juveniles are not actually criminals. That's a civil case. They don't hear any criminal cases, though, in Texas Supreme Court. Other thing they do is they establish the rules of administration for the Texas judicial system. So they make the rules, and that's a very powerful thing to do. So the Texas Supreme Court is a very powerful court, even though they don't hear any criminal cases. When it comes to judicial elections, the Texas District Courts, the Supreme Courts, Texas Court of Criminal Appeals judges, all of those judges are elected to 6-year terms, and they are elected. They're not appointed. There are times when the governor can fill an appointment because someone leaves office before their term is up. But once that term is up, that appointment's over and it goes back to an election. So in Texas, we elect our judges, and the higher the level of judges, the longer your term tends to be. These judges have long terms, but they are elected by the people. That will end the video. Thank you very much. I hope this helps you out. I appreciate your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. Have a good day.